I love that voice.
Right.
Good evening, and welcome to the Pathways Planning and Insights webinar, the pros and cons of scholarships and loans. My name is Mark Salisbury. I want to thank NextGen Personal Finance for sponsoring this series, and so that you can learn all of the details about the financial elements of planning for education high school. Before we begin, if you've not already found it, please use the interpretation icon that's located in the Zoom control panel at the bottom of your screen to select your language of choice. You can listen to this webinar in English, Spanish, Mandarin, and Cantonese. I really want to thank Sean, Leanne, and Carly for providing live translations throughout the evening. All right, so let's get started. I want to start by telling the story of two different students who both need scholarships and loans to help them pay for college. But they each approach this process very differently, and as a result, end up in very different places. Sierra applied many of the ideas that I'm going to share with you tonight to make sure that her scholarships and loans served a very specific purpose and only filled small gaps in her college funding plan. Joe just assumed that whatever money he didn't have to pay for college, he could get from scholarships and loans. This set him up for a lot of disappointment and heartbreak later on. Every one of you can end up like Sierra and avoid ending up like Joe. Our agenda tonight looks like this. First, it's so important to understand that there is a marketplace for scholarships and loans. Second, I want to help you understand how to keep all of this in balance. Third, we'll talk about the pros and cons and trade-offs of scholarships. Fourth, we'll talk about the pros and cons and trade-offs of loans. And then finally, I'll give you a list of strategies that you can apply to help you be successful with scholarships and loans. So let's start by talking about the marketplace that you're going to walk into. You've heard me say it before. College admissions is a marketplace with all of the behaviors that happen in an environment where a seller wants you to pay more and you, the buyer, wants to pay less. Right next door sits a whole nother marketplace that's only focused on how people pay for college. In this marketplace, there are many different actors who are focused on making money for their own businesses. Yes, there are some that are more focused on helping, philanthropies and foundations that are only focused on giving money or support to students who need it. But they don't have a lot of control in that marketplace. And sometimes it's hard to tell the difference from the outside, which actors are which. Most of the scholarship and loan companies are businesses. Their goal is to make money by providing a product that you need in order to pay for college. And the successful businesses have found a lot of ways to make money in this marketplace. Now, there's nothing wrong with businesses making money, but just know that these companies are not solely focused on goodwill or your goals. They're in this marketplace to make money for themselves first. And this marketplace is big, big business. Between 12 billion a year in new private loans and 8 billion a year in private scholarships, this is a very active marketplace. These companies make money in two ways. Sometimes they give you something for free, and then offer you another product, maybe even something that looks better, but you have to pay for it. Sometimes they collect lots of data from you, some of which you give them, and some of which they just take because they can, and because you agree to let them. And then they sell that data to anyone and everyone who will buy it. But this doesn't mean that you have to run and hide from this marketplace. This marketplace can be exactly where you find the scholarships and loans that you might need to make paying for college possible. The key is that you need to enter this marketplace with open eyes, a clear purpose, and a vigilant mind. Know exactly what you're getting into and understand what these companies may ask for or may try to acquire from you. If you approach this marketplace with this perspective, you will be far more successful in getting what you need and not giving up what you don't want to give up. Of course, you want your exploration into scholarships and loans to result in getting the additional money you need to pay for college. But you also want that additional money to be in balance with the other sources of funding that you have to pay for college. Because remember, the goal is to graduate from college into young adulthood when you are not constrained by debt. So let's talk more about what exactly you are balancing and what a good balance looks like. Scholarships and loans can have many benefits in addition to filling in a funding gap. Yes, additional scholarships and loans will increase your financial support. But scholarships and loans can also serve as a useful motivating force to keep your student focused on the reason why they're in college. Receiving a scholarship of any kind can be an important boost to a student's confidence. There are many families that believe strongly in using scholarships and loans to ensure that their student is properly motivated to push themselves in college and have some quote unquote skin in the game. Finding the right balance always starts with answering this question: what is the goal? The goal is not just to get more money. The goal is to ensure that your student has the right balance of obligations and opportunities. If the student has too many obligations, that will limit their opportunities and they won't get the most of what they can get out of college. In the same way, if they have all kinds of opportunities and very few obligations, that increases the likelihood that the student won't invest themselves in learning and growing. They won't push themselves to make the most out of their college experience. To think more carefully about what do I mean by obligations and opportunities, let's ask a couple of questions. Loans always come with a pretty simple obligation. That money is not a gift. You have to pay it back. But scholarships can also come with obligations. Everything from being required to write a thank you letter to the individual that provided the scholarship, to being required to maintain a very high GPA, and even volunteer extra hours of service in order to receive or renew that scholarship. It's really important to understand that what the renewal terms of that scholarship or loan are. The other side of this balancing act is about the opportunities. Does this scholarship or loan enable you to do something that significantly increases your opportunities, either to learn now or to gain a better job later? This is sometimes a difficult question to answer clearly because there's a tendency to build the opportunities up to be bigger than they actually are. However, that doesn't mean those opportunities don't exist at all. Spelling out clearly and carefully the trade-offs in this balancing act between obligations and opportunities will help ensure that you ultimately have the right balance of funding sources to pay for college. And where do you find the details about those obligations and opportunities? It is always in the fine print. It's incredibly important to read that fine print before taking out a loan or accepting a scholarship. So, approaching this marketplace with open eyes, a clear purpose, and a vigilant mind, let's get started. Let's talk about scholarships first. Scholarships can come from multiple sources, and who those sources are go a long way in determining what the fine print says. Scholarships can come from colleges and universities. In fact, this is very often a part of a student's financial aid package. But the colleges and universities also have scholarships that students need to apply for separately. Or scholarships will come from private organizations. And those organizations fall into two categories. The first is philanthropies, foundations, nonprofit organizations that really are focused on doing good in the world. The other category is corporations that use scholarships and loans to serve their own purposes. The money that they give away is still money and it's useful, but the fact that these corporations have an ulterior motive matters, and it is important to pay attention to. Let's start with the pros and cons of scholarships from colleges and universities. The scholarships from colleges and universities are the largest source of scholarship aid. These scholarships are regularly tens of thousands of dollars per year. However, it is very important to recognize that the reason these scholarships are often so large is because the college or university has set a very high sticker price. And the most important issue for you is not the size of the scholarship. It's the amount of money that you still have to pay after that scholarship. So don't let yourself swoon over the size of the scholarship until you've figured out what your price tag is after subtracting that scholarship from the hefty sticker price. Again, scholarships from colleges and universities can seem to be very large. But what colleges and universities don't tell you is that they often apply two caveats to the way that they manage those scholarships. The first is called front loading, and the second they often refer to as folding in. Now, let me talk more about both of those. This is where knowing the fine print is so important. Front loading of scholarships is a practice of giving large scholarships for the first year of college that don't get renewed or won't last past the first year. This means that unless you are careful, it will feel like you've run out of money long before you get to the finish line. There are two kinds of front loading. The first one is a lot easier to catch. This is where the college tells you in pretty clear terms that on top of the financial aid they have already awarded you, they are going to give you an additional scholarship for your first year. Sometimes this comes in the form of an award that you would get for attending a visit day on that college's campus. In other cases, it might just be a small scholarship that recognizes something you've done in your community. No matter the reason for the scholarship, the important thing to know is that it won't last. Often, students and families get caught talking about the size of their scholarship and the price they have to pay in the first year, and then begin to think that this is the same price that they'll be asked to pay every year. They forget about the one-year scholarship was clearly intended to entice the student to enroll. The second kind of front loading is much more difficult to spot and often has much larger negative consequences. This kind of front-loading involves awarding a scholarship that can be renewed, but then setting the bar for renewal so high that very few students can achieve it. For example, you can find academic scholarships that freshmen will receive for academic accomplishments in high school. The scholarship is a large one. It's very attractive. But in order to renew that scholarship, the student will have to maintain a very high college GPA, perhaps a 3.8 on a 4-point scale. The college knows that many of the students to whom they award this scholarship will not be able to renew it, but they don't tell you that. So, student and the family are surprised when they find out that they lost that scholarship. Of course, the family, parents blame the student. The student feels bad but doesn't know what they can do. And it can really impact the relationship between parents and student. This information is always in the fine print, and it's really important to read these details so that you can compare offers between colleges. Folding in scholarship money, also known as scholarship displacement, is a particularly frustrating practice that is common among public and private colleges and universities. Here's how it works. The college that has accepted you and has decided on a price that they believe you should pay. They award you a financial aid package that leaves you with the responsibility to pay some of the remaining price tag. But then the college decides that if you earn any private scholarship money, the college will subtract that amount from the financial aid they've already awarded you, thus leaving you with the same price that they decided you should pay at the very beginning. You can see how absurd this is for anyone who's trying to pull together the money to pay a college bill. Students encouraged by parents, teachers, many others in the community to apply for private scholarships. The student puts in all kinds of effort trying to find the money to enroll at the college where they've been accepted. But then, when the student does win a private scholarship, the college, instead of applauding the student's dedication and persistence to find additional funding sources, quote unquote, folds in the money, reducing the amount of the institutional aid that the college awarded the student by the same amount as the private scholarship that the student just received, so that the student is no better off than when they started. There are 5 states that have passed laws banning this practice, and several states where the legislation is awaiting passage. However, only one state has banned the practice at all public and private colleges and universities, no matter who the student is, and that's the state of Washington. You really need to find out what the college's policy on private scholarships is. And the only way you're going to find that is by asking them directly. Sometimes they put something on their website, but often what's on their website isn't as clearly stated as the public would like it to be. And you need to get very clear information from them. The world of private scholarships from private organizations is a completely different place. This is because the money that makes up the scholarships coming from these organizations is not just a discount off a weirdly high sticker price. These scholarship funds have actually been raised by someone or some group and have been allocated specifically for students heading off to college. In most cases, applications for private scholarships from private organizations are not particularly difficult. In many cases, they'll ask you for an essay, but not always. You can be sure that in most cases, the application for private scholarship is less detailed than the application for college admission. But unlike the scholarships coming from the schools themselves, private scholarships are rarely more than several $1,000s. And unlike many college and university scholarships, Most private scholarships are only for 1 year. There are thousands and thousands of private scholarships. And for decades, the difficulty was in finding them because they were scattered across corporations, community foundations, and private offices. The internet brought the opportunity to search the scholarships all in one place. And over the last couple of decades, a whole bunch of scholarship search engines have emerged in the world of ed tech. The great thing is that they are really easy to use and get results from. However, the success of these platforms has created a situation where far more students can apply to far more scholarships without ever leaving the kitchen table. The result has been that many more scholarships now receive many, many more applicants. And although that might be exciting for the folks who offer the scholarships, it's not such great news for the individual student who's hoping to win some scholarship money. There are plenty of stories of students who spent days, even weeks, searching for scholarships online and then sending in applications only to be left with nothing because all the scholarships they applied for had tens of thousands of applicants. The best way to be most efficient with your time when it comes to winning private scholarship money is to go a little bit old school. The scholarships that you have the best chance of winning are the scholarships that are offered to students just like you, from the same town you're from, maybe even from the same high school that you attend. And these scholarships are rarely listed in an online search tool. Instead, these scholarships are often in paper files and paper forms, kept in a filing cabinet in your high school counseling office or your local community foundation. The best way to apply for scholarships where you have the best chance of winning is to start local. Now, this doesn't mean that you should avoid online scholarship searches at all costs. Instead, you should spend some time looking for options online. But remember, just like we said earlier, when you venture into the world of online scholarship search and private scholarships coming from private for-profit corporations, go in with open eyes and a clear purpose and a vigilant mind. With scholarships that you find online or scholarship websites advertising scholarship services, beware of two things. The first thing to watch out for is upselling. These companies will often use the presence of thousands of scholarships as bait to get you to start down their rabbit hole. Then, once you are well on your way, they will show you more sophisticated tools that probably seem like exactly what you need, but they come at a substantial cost. It turns out scholarships are a great way to attract people who are worrying about paying for college, especially if they've already fallen for a school that is well outside their price range. The second thing to watch out for is scholarship sites that want to turn you into their product. Their business model is built on gathering your data, every last bit of it, and then selling it over and over and over. This is how Facebook works. This is how many social media sites work. So the scholarship sites take the same approach. Attract you in every way that they can to provide as much information about yourself as you could possibly provide. They will track your browser history, they'll track your activity on your site, and will even try to explore other things that you do online if you let them. Every one of these sites has a long and very boring terms of use and privacy policy. You should read these documents carefully and then look for all the ways that you can opt out of sharing your data. Or, at the very least, know exactly what data they are collecting and understand the trade-offs you're making in letting them take and see your data. Okay, let's turn to the topic of loans. I know that this is a topic that causes a lot of stress because we've now seen a couple of decades of many people getting stuck with way too much student debt. But that's not inevitable, and especially now that the federal government made some major changes to loan programs and the different ways that you can repay those loans, there are some very clear ways to take advantage of loans and use them to your benefit. But like so many other things, you have to be careful, know exactly what you're getting into, and keep things in balance. There are four types of student loans. The first is the federal student loan. The second is the federal direct plus loan, often called the parent plus loan. The third is the state-based nonprofit organization that provides student loans. And the fourth is the big world of for-profit companies offering private student loans. Let's dig a little deeper here. The federal student loan program is the one that gets the most attention and should be the first option if you're considering borrowing to pay for college. These loans have the most friendly terms for borrowers. The interest rates are lower than any of the others, and there are several different ways to have your loans forgiven in exchange for public service or in other specific circumstances. The only thing a student has to do in order to access these loans is complete a FAFSA. And with the deadline of June 30th every year, students can access these loans after they've chosen a college to attend, if they've gone through the application process during the winter previous to when they would enroll. The federal direct plus loan is often considered the second best option. However, it's unique because the loan is taken out by the parent rather than the student. The parent has to qualify for the plus loan, and sometimes this creates a problem because parents won't find out if they qualify until months after their student may have decided to submit a tuition deposit at a particular college or university. The interest rates for this loan are not as low as the federal student loan, but they are often lower than private loans. The PLUS loan program also has multiple repayment options, and borrowers do benefit from the fact that it is a federal program. However, this loan has created many problems in the last decade because it does not have a maximum borrowing amount. There are many parents who have used this PLUS loan as a sort of bottomless fund to fill in whatever costs their student incur in college. The result has been that these families are forced to postpone retirement, or they are put in other financial challenges later in life. Most conversations about student loans don't differentiate between the loans offered by state-based nonprofit organizations and private corporations. But I think the differences between the two are worth noting. If a student must borrow beyond the federal student loan limits, the state-based nonprofit organization can sometimes have a lower interest rate than a PLUS loan and more friendly terms for borrowers. Because these organizations are nonprofit and more focused on the mission of increasing college access, they tend to be a better option for students than private for-profit loan companies. That leaves us with the private for-profit loan companies. Often these are companies that have lots of money to advertise, and they plaster their name all over commercials, they interrupt your YouTube, and they put their name on sports stadiums. However, despite the fun marketing, these companies are very clearly about making money first. They are the ones that offer variable rate loans. where your interest rate could change and the borrower oftentimes isn't aware. If you find yourself in a position where these student loans are really your only option, I would strongly recommend that you rethink your whole plan and find another way to access college that won't require you to borrow from a for-profit loan company. The fine print on loans is important to read and understand. Understanding how interest works is critical. Comparing interest rates over time will be well worth the effort. As I mentioned before, there are lots of student loans that have a variable interest rate. This has caused so many problems in the past. Stay far away from variable rate interest loans. The other fine print that's really important to know about is the repayment plan. The new plan from the federal government includes an income-based repayment, what the federal government calls income-driven repayment, that is very friendly to borrowers and makes it possible to manage loans even when life takes an unexpected turn. If your income drops, your payments drop, and they stay in proportion to your income. Finally, it's really important to understand how much you can borrow and how much is too much to borrow. The rule that has become the accepted wisdom is that a student shouldn't graduate from college with more loan money than their first-year salary. That means that a student who graduates with a degree in teaching or social work should not borrow nearly as much as a student who graduates with a degree in engineering or computer science. The reason is that teachers and social workers make less in starting salaries than engineers and computer scientists. Of course, the dilemma is that most students aren't sure exactly what career they're going to graduate into when they make their decision about which college to attend. And as a result, how much they will borrow. So it's very important to be conservative and opt for the smaller loan amount or not borrow at all if you're unsure about what your career direction will eventually be. With all this information, there's a lot to think about. And everyone's circumstances are different and need to be carefully considered before identifying what is right for you. With that said, here are some strategies that you can apply using the information that we've talked about today to help you make the most of scholarships and loans. First, before anything else, establish your budget before you start looking at colleges and universities. There could not be a more important piece of advice than that. If you know your budget before you start to shop for college, then you will be able to very clearly determine the size of the gap that you might need to fill with scholarships and loans. But if you start this process by picking a bunch of colleges that you like without knowing what any of them will cost, you are far more likely to end up with a much larger gap to fill than is healthy for you and your student. Earlier, I talked about focusing on local scholarships and putting your effort into finding opportunities at your high school and at your local community foundation. Many of those scholarships will indicate that they like to see students engaged in specific, certain co-curricular activities. Many students and families see these applications and realize that if they'd only known what these scholarships liked to see a little earlier, their student could have made themselves into an extremely attractive candidate. But by the time they looked at those scholarship applications in the senior year, it was too late. If you take a couple hours over a couple of weeks and investigate the kinds of things that your local scholarships really like to see, and do it a year in advance before you're completing those applications, you can dramatically increase the strength of your application. As you look at colleges and universities, ask them, how do they treat private scholarships? Because if you know that they will subtract any private scholarship you receive from the awards that they give you, then you know some information that can help you be more efficient with your time. For example, if you decide to go to a school that folds in private scholarships, then it might not be worth a minute of your time to apply for any of them. And instead, you would be better off putting time into earning more college credits while you're still in high school through dual enrollment, for example. Or you might rule that school out completely because you know that you've already received a private scholarship. When using online scholarship search platforms, please understand that you are in a marketplace where the companies want to make money from you. That doesn't mean they're evil, it just means they're good capitalists, like any other marketplace. So engage them with eyes open, opt out of data sharing, protect your own data carefully. Just understand the rules of the game that you're in. There is a relationship between the amount of money that you owe and the range of opportunities that you can seriously consider after you graduate. Try to preserve that range of opportunities as much as you can, especially when you aren't exactly sure what those opportunities might look like. Once you get further along into your degree and you know the kind of career you're going to pursue, then you can be more deliberate in borrowing an appropriate amount. But early on in your college career, especially if you don't know what you want to study or what you want to do after college, be conservative in borrowing choices. One other thing to know, if you know what you're majoring in and you're well into your major, you can oftentimes find loans with lower interest rates. Finally, we've talked about loans primarily in the context of their financial implications. But there are many who have used loans effectively to produce positive, non-monetary results. Sometimes, this is a really smart approach to help your student develop into the kind of mature young adult that you know they need to be. Young graduates that have manageable loans to pay back can benefit from the reality that they are graduating into. It's really important that all of this stays in balance, but don't rule out the possibility that you could use loans to help your student grow. Okay. First of all, thank you for attending this webinar, and thank you so much to all of our interpreters who provided translations throughout. I also want to thank Next Gen Personal Finance again for sponsoring this series. We've shared a lot of information with you, and this is recorded, so you can go back and review anything that you might have missed. But before we end, we've got some time to take some questions. And so I wanted to leave some time here for people to ask any questions that have come up. You can use the chat feature to just stick your questions in the chat. I think you could also put them in a, no, I think there's just the chat. There we go. You can put your questions in the chat, and we'll do the best that we can to answer them. If you have questions about other things related to the college planning process that have come up right now, I know everybody's sort of scrambling and fretting about the FAFSA stuff these days, and yeah, it's kind of a goofy thing, but if you have questions about completing the FAFSA, I'm more than happy to try to answer them for you as well. And Maddie, if you have any questions that you hear from students and families regularly that come up, you feel free to tune in or add those to the conversation, and we're glad to try to answer as many as we can. One thing that I hear a lot is that folks ask the question about community college and then four-year school versus is that smarter from a scholarships and loan standpoint? Because they wonder if colleges don't give out as much institutional aid to transfer students as they give to entering first-year students. It absolutely used to be the case that, especially amongst private colleges, that they would give out large institutional aid to incoming freshmen, and students who wanted to transfer in got very little aid. And it was pretty clear what those schools' priorities were. But in more recent years, what's happened has been a real shift, because the fact of the matter is there's just not as many students around as there used to be nationally. Now, that's not exactly the case in the Southwest, California, as it is in the rest of the country. But you may be looking at schools outside of California. But one thing is really has changed is that small private colleges are much more willing to give scholarship money, institutional aid, to students who are transferring from a two-year school to their four-year school than they used to be. So one thing to just keep in mind is that assumption, that old school way of doing things has really changed, and it's not the same as it used to be. If anyone has any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. And if you don't, I'm more than happy to end early and give everybody the rest of the evening to do what you all need to do. Great. Thanks for the kind words, Bradley. I appreciate that. Maddie, anything that pops to mind that you'd like me to pontificate on with my head cold before we go?
No, I don't think so, Mark. I thought it was
Okay.
a very informative presentation, and we have the recording, so we'll be posting it to our YouTube page, and also posting a link on our website as well.
Awesome. Great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing everybody again in a couple of weeks. And Maddie, you told me that everybody had last week off. They had no school last week. Is that right?
Yeah, they had no school for President's Week. Our school was off.
All right. Well, just so y'all know, in Iowa, we were in school and we were shoveling and taking care of things so that you guys could enjoy a week of vacation. I know I can speak from all of us in Iowa, what we would have given to be in California last week with all of you. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, Mark. It's all about the silver linings.
That's right,
Thank you.
exactly.